Welcome, everybody, to the Grab Lives podcast. I'm your host, John Vargas, and just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do does not reflect the views or opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. Now, today's guest is Dr. Brock Johnson, and he's a functional neuropractic chiropractor. He's a functional neurologist chiropractor. I think I got that right. If you listen in the episode, for sure he breaks it down. But, my biggest thing for behavioral health is one of the benefactors of having chronic pain. And when I went through my back injury and I was able to recover, I did it through a very interesting way. And it's different from just going through the regular mundane ways of going to see a doctor, have them cut into your body and do things. They either take it out or put something back in. I didn't do that. I told myself I'm going to do everything organically. And the way I came across Dr. Brock Johnson was really fascinating. He helped me recover with my back injury, and I had 2 herniated discs. Man, that injury was really, really frustrating. So I know everyone I'm talking to has had some type of back pain in their career. And if you haven't, then man, that's awesome. But I know a lot of people who have back pain and chronic back pain. So I thought this was a really great episode to illuminate what Dr. Brock Johnson does. If you live in the Southern California area, he's one of the only people who does this practice with functional neurology and also helps you strengthen your body through a different phase, through his 3 phases of treatment. Very practical, very non-invasive, but super interesting. Just learning about what he knows about neurology and how the brain functions and how it's attributed to the muscle and the little small muscles in your surrounding your spinal cord. Really, really fascinating episode. So if you are interested in seeing him, he's over in Western Garden Grove. If you're around this general area, and if you're not from Southern California, definitely listen in to what he has to say. I hope that everyone finds this to be educational. And if you get a chance, go see him if you're around this general area, because he helped my back tremendously and get my body out of pain and to be functional, where I can go back to work and fighting fires and, working, 3-4 days in a row without pain. So anyways, everyone take care. Listen to this fascinating episode. I love you.
It's time for Grab Lives.
So, I am curious about your naval experience. You served the Navy, right?
Oh, yeah, I did 3 years from 94 to 97.
Okay. And then, so 94 to 97. So was that after the Gulf War?
Yeah, it was
during
right
the
in
Gulf War?
between.
Okay.
Between Desert Storm and Gulf.
Okay.
It was Daddy, Clinton was in. So
Okay.
Clinton was decommissioning most of the stuff. So all we had at that time were like hotspots or conflicts.
Mm.
No actual wars. But I went to Bosnia.
Mm.
So I was on a Gator freighter or a Marine aircraft carrier. Those are pretty big. Those are great because the back door of those ships, it ballasts and opens, and then you have all these LCAC that come out, and you can fit tanks and 80 troops on there. But that's how they storm the beaches.
Oh, really?
They're amazing. They're hovercraft, huge hovercrafts. So we have to. Well, actually, I was an electrician over there, so we had to keep those things operative. And one of them was down. I got a meritorious service award just for helping to fix one of those LCACs.
Oh, wow.
But that was a fun ship.
What do you think is your favorite story and serving in the Navy?
Oh. Also in Bosnia, because they were in civil war. Mm-hmm. I think the Hindus and Islam, or some of the religious factions, they were fighting. And we were 30 miles off coast. And the Marines, as an electrician, we're just operating the ship. We're down in the pits. We're getting the generators going. They're just doing our main ship maintenance. But they would come back and tell us stories. And there was a helicopter, a Cobra helicopter pilot, and we're standing in line for lunch, and he's just telling me stories about it. He's like, oh yeah, he said he flew out and he saw a combative with I think it was a bazooka or a missile launcher from his shoulder. He shot at his helicopter and he dodged it. And then he ran into a warehouse and he sent a missile after him and blew the whole thing.
Holy shit.
But I only saw the action from stories that they told us like the next day.
Oh, wow.
But the one I remember the most, we had a general quarters in the middle of the night.
Mm.
So we're 30 miles offshore in Bosnia. And we manned a hose. And in the side of the ship, they have these windows. They're just permanent windows, huge windows. And we're looking, that's where they raise the boats on the side. They have the 4 ropes that go down. We can lower and bring up the boats. And they were climbing. Someone was climbing those ropes. And the top deck is about 60 feet. So they're climbing for quite a ways, trying to get in these open windows. So we had manned hoses, and we were spraying them off the ropes. We didn't know who they were. They came to the ship they're at war, so they thought they were bringing it to us. So we're spraying them down, and some of them did drown, because you can't say, but we sent the search and rescue out to get them, and we balanced out the back door of the ship, and then we brought them in with the Marines. And we were sitting around, and they couldn't identify them. It's about 60 men, no women, no families, kids, nothing, just 60 guys. And they eventually had translators and figured out they were prisoners.
Mm.
So when they were doing Civil War, some of the jailers turned the keys over to the prisoners and they got out. The problem is they jumped on a boat that was only good for like 30 people. So these things are coming out and they're sinking because they have about 60 on there.
Oh.
So when he finally did rescue enough of them, we had them in the hangar bay trying to figure out what to do with them. And we had all the officials calling and the ambassadors trying to get him into Italy or someone take these guys. But no one wanted them. So we had to put them back on helicopters under armed guards and drop them off at shore.
That's pretty interesting because you don't really know what's going on, but it could be a potential threat, right? So you're kind of like, okay,
storming our boat.
There's people coming onto our boat and we're in some type of warfare right now. So, what are you supposed to do? That's pretty crazy.
That's true. Yeah, that's the one I remember the most.
That's a good story. Okay, so we're going to start to introduce Dr. Brock Johnson here. And Dr. Brock Johnson, would you call it you're a functional chiropractic neurologist? Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Versus under the AMA, they're the pathologic neurologists. So they do pathologies, we do function.
Okay. And so I'm having Dr. Brock Johnson on here because he had assisted me with my back injury. And the way I came across Dr. Brock was my friend had called me, and formerly known as Stella, that's her name. And so she calls me and she's like, hey, Jonathan, I got to send you to this guy. He's a wizard. That's what literally the words she said. He's a wizard and you got to go see him.
Exactly.
And because she knows about my history with my head trauma and just been kind of rid with pain after that, like just chronic pain and trying to get to the bottom of it, right? So that's how I came across his office. It's in Garden Grove, not too far from where I was at. And I've just been on this just straight ahead mission to, get around being free of pain per se. And what happened was for my back injury, I had last year I was working a ton of shifts, and on Halloween night, we were just so busy, and I was doing so many different things on top of like going to fires and training a rookie and training a paramedic intern. And just by the end of that shift, I don't know what happened. My body just said no more. I woke up at the station and I couldn't get up out of bed. It was just locked up. My back seized up on me. And I kind of waited in bed so I can get like the energy to get up out of bed to crawl to the captain's office. And I was just telling the captain, hey man, like my back is messed up. I gotta go to first care, which is what we call going to the clinic, right? It's workers' comp. You got to go get checked out. And then from there, you figure out your pathway through different doctors through the workers' comp, algorithm, however you want to put it. But
that's a good way to say it.
But it really is an algorithm because you can only go to certain doctors. And from there, it's like, what do you do? Because you're limited. And when I went to the first doctor at the clinic, he was like tell me, "Oh, you're fine. This is just a back spasm." And he gave me a prescription for ibuprofen, Tylenol, and a muscle relaxer. And he's like, "Just do physical therapy, and maybe in about a couple weeks we'll send you back to work." And
That's
I was
the
like,
flow.
"No, dude, this is something else. This is something different." And he was trying to talk me out of, my injury. He's trying to explain to me and tell me my truth. Like, "Hey, no, this is just nothing." So, we ended up getting an MRI. He's like, "Yeah, you had a couple bulging discs, a couple weeks later." And I was just like, damn, like, this is not just a bulging disc, So I finally got out of seeing that doctor, went to a specialist. And then finally that specialist did an actual reading of the MRI. And he's like, "No, you have 2 herniated discs, and one of the discs has a tear in the disc. So he wants to do surgery." And I'm like, "No, dude, I'm not doing surgery." So talking to him, I was just like, I really don't want to do surgery. I'm out of the idea of like cutting into the body, and like, cause once you cut, you
There's
cannot
more damage.
uncut. Right. So I'll try to shorten this story, but, I really want to do things organically, when it comes to my body, especially with injuries. Right. So, later down the road, I was like, okay, I'll do the physical therapy and work through trying to heal that route. Right. And, Haley's a yoga teacher. So she's like, you need to do these yoga poses and help your back strengthen. Right. And so I was feeling pretty good for a little bit. And then I kept having these back spasms where, I would have to lay on my back like a turtle,
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So it came to the point where I was like, okay, I am very aware of stem cell injection therapy, and I believe in it because just hearing all the stories and things like that. So I ended up doing my research,
It's big now.
and I went to Ensenada, and this doctor, his name is Dr. Hino over in Ensenada. He has this clinic called Hino medical therapy, and they do stem cell injections. And he gave me a really good price. Because I was a firefighter, or because I'm a firefighter, he gave me $4,000 off the price he gave me. And so I ended up paying 10 grand for my treatment. And so I know in the States, if you get a stem cell therapy, it's about $4 grand for 1 milliliter of that stem cell. And you're not getting the right stem cells too, because the FDA regulations here in the States. So I think with all that, in Mexico, the stem cells they give you are the pluripotent stem cells, which are different from what FDA has here in the States. And they gave me 3 milliliters of injections a day for 5 days. And I think that correlated to about 200 million stem cells in 1 milliliter. And then after that, they gave me 250 million stem cells IV. So after that, that Gambit, really great facility. That doctor was truly amazing. He was an ex-Marine, and then he was telling me he got shot in the neck when he was in his last tour in Iraq and displaced 3 discs. And then he didn't get surgery. He did stem cells and rebuilt the discs completely. And then he was telling me, he's like, don't ever get surgery. He's like, just come here and we'll hook you up. And he was saying that just surgery is an old way of doing type of medical care. And he was kind of explaining to me his version of what he believes, how, back in the medieval times, they're practicing on people, on cadavers and things like that, to cut into them to figure out anatomy of the body. And for some reason, they started thinking this is a good way to work on people. Right.
Stiffen with live tissue.
Right. And so I was under the impression, like, you're right. That is like an old way of doing stuff. Right. And then, but the only thing is, like, the paradigm of medical care these days, people trust the doctor, right? Hey, I'm going to trust you with my life. Number one, to put me to sleep, right? Intubate me. And then I'm going to have you cut into my body, take something out, put something in. And now let's see how it works. Let's see how the body figures it out.
Just like a switch.
Right. And so, having a conversation with that man, I mean, he was in his late 60s and he looked like a specimen. He was very in shape. He was ripped. He just had, like, super just bulging veins out of his arms and his neck. And he was just
That's awesome.
he looked great. I was like, what are you doing? I'm doing stem cells, for my injuries. And then, he said he did synthetic tea, which I had a conversation with him about. Like I don't believe synthetic tea is great, or
I don't know much about that one.
synthetic HGH. So
Ah.
he's a big proponent on that. But, having the conversation with him about the stem cells was great because, over time, he's like, it's going to take some time. It's not like a magic bullet per se right off the bat. It can take up to like 6 months to a year for the disc to start to rebuild. So after that treatment,
that makes sense.
right. So after that treatment, I actually was in a lot of pain for about 2 months. He said that's normal. He's like, when you have pain, it means that there's an inflammatory response and you have stem cells going into that inflammation response to heal the disc tissue and the tendons or whatever it needs to be replaced. And it's like growing pains, right? You have new tissue building around the injury site. So pretty amazing stuff there. But that's only one part of the story here. Like I was still in pain and I knew I needed to do physical therapy. And that's when I got the call from Stella. She's like, go see Dr. Brock. And that's where I came across you. So
Stella's great.
that's why we're going to
Very
talk
wise.
about, that's why we're going to talk about, like what you do and the intricacies, because when I saw you, I told you about my stem cell treatment. You're like, yeah, that's great, but it's not going to strengthen the small muscles that are supporting the spinal cord, right? That's what you had mentioned to me.
Yeah, because that's in the deepest layer. So when you're dealing with the ligaments and the discs, it's a last layer of protection. Because if you lose the muscles that move it unconsciously, then all you have left is the disc and ligaments. But we have a supportive system connected through the speed and brain that hold different layers of muscles together. And when those turn off in certain ways, like light switches, then the body will automatically default into a casting system. So when we're casted, we go back to fetal posture. So the neck and the shoulders roll forward, our low back locks in and stiffens, and we just go back to fetal. That's our default position. So like from development, automatically from 0 to 2 years, we're turning on reflexes and being able to hold our head and getting our extensors back. Our posture extends and we start to walk and do higher function. But that's an automatic system, and that program's already made in brain. And we would ignore it, or we do other things in moving like we did when we were from 0 to 2 or like a toddler. Then it starts to shut down and bring us back into flexion. It's an amazing
That's
system.
interesting. Yeah, you understand it on a different level, because when we were talking, everything started clicking for me because it was number one, an educational faction with understanding my body. And then the second thing was we kind of correlated, you and I, that my head injury was the main precursor to the injury because it started shutting down the right side of my body. And I found that to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, because every part of the brain has to fire at a certain speed and be balanced from the right to left. So that controls all muscle tone and organs and how we perceive the world. But it's all about the speed. So what I learned from as an electrician, that it's all the conductive speed of the neurons from the brain. And if it's interrupted, and it could be interrupted from being imbalanced in brain function, just if you're, we call them hemisphericities. So if you're, like I'm left brain dominant. So I'm more analytical, step by step. Worst cases, you see personality traits like OCD. They have to clean. Everything has a place in the house, and everything has to be put away. Those are high left function brain. So when I'm higher left in brain function, it controls all my muscle tone on the left. The majority of it, 90% of muscle tone, comes straight down from that side of brain. So if the problem is that imbalances out my right. So in degeneration over years, which all of us go through, if you're heavy or strong dominant on one side, the other side fatigues because the brain's not being used. You're not training it, just like a muscle would. If you're not using it, it's not firing fast enough. And so my right side was the hemispheristic weakness. So I was so dominant left brain, my left side was fine, but it started to fatigue or slow down connection to my muscle tone on my right side. So then I had more of a rolled shoulder and an imbalance in my neck position. My hip was tighter, my low back was tighter. So these are small windows into determining what your hemisphericity would be, or your underused side of brain. And all of us have one dominant side and one weaker side. And that's the key.
Yeah, that was when we started talking about this. That made total sense, and I kind of correlated to like all firefighters, right? They have to be analytical and logical, step by step. As
That's
left
what brings
brain,
them into it.
right? So I would assume that most people in this like administrative function with, going and doing operations, right? And even a police officer or any type of military personnel, they have to have that. And if you don't have that, you have to start programming your left side of your brain to engage that part of your brain. So you're going to have to function that way because that's the way we operate, right? And
Exactly.
as far as getting a task completed. So I find it pretty interesting how most people have a lot of pain, right? And because they're out of balance, right? With overusing the left side of the brain. And then now they have pain and other, they're atrophying that brain function to the right side of the body.
Yeah, it's just not used. So the brain's very efficient. It'll start shutting down what it doesn't need if you're not using it. But yeah, the professions are picked by actually our brain function. So if we're very analytical and we can follow instruction and memorize like high function of processing, then that's a left brain dominant. Those jobs are like that. Firemen have codes to follow and procedures to follow. Police, any of that, even going through school, years and years of just memorizing. It's all systems. Very systematic people are always left brain dominant, and that they pick the profession because that's who they are to do it. So the job doesn't pick us. We are actually we're built for that job. Just like the other side, the right brain hemispheric people, or the ones that are dominant right, they can start a lot of different projects. Completion isn't a big thing, but they can see big picture, very artistic. They can create from scratch, or like an artist is a good example. Most artists are right brain creative, so they can start amazing things from scratch. But a left brain artist comes in and they look at all those different works. Oh, you created this, that one created this, and they can actually compile them together, which is nice. So they're finishers, they're completers. So they finish things like that. It's great. So most management positions are left brain dominant. So they rise out of the ranks and they have this executive function in their brain. So they manage all the creative people.
That makes total sense, like how we're designed, right? And to, I guess, co-inhabit with society with each other, right? We're kind of doing both parts in a way, but
exactly. It's about 50-50, I think.
It was crazy. Like, yeah, right. 50-50. That's what it.
Yeah. Left versus right. And you've seen couples a lot of times, they're opposite attracts.
Yeah.
Mostly brain function.
Makes total sense. So I'm under the impression that we're really designed by like computers. The more I have gone into the rabbit hole with my own body and my own just expertise with intuition with how things are operating, and looking into finding the best balanced lifestyle and harmonious lifestyle within my system, right? And it proves it more and more the more I go down this path, that how much we're just like computers. Like, and where did they get this computer software from? Like, the
human brain.
Right. They got it from humanity, right? We already hold this technology. And I just had this conversation yesterday with a guy at work. Like, hey, dude, like, people are so afraid of artificial intelligence, right? Like, and we're losing the concept that we are already quantum computers ourselves. But if we're putting power outside of ourselves, then we're going to become a victim to an outside technology. When if we use technology to our advantage, when we realize we are more intelligent than computers, then we get out of the concept of fear with the way we're moving forward. And what, next 10 years from now, it's going to be way more advanced, right? But to realize the power we have, the power we hold, it really has to be unlocked, and going through functional neurologists like yourself to break something down. Like, the way I saw it was it's like a switchboard of, just buttons you're pressing to fire off new wavelengths of electricity to the body that's not firing anymore, that's not operating, right? So that's how I kind of saw it, because I was basically, your patient, and when we're talking and I'm seeing how it's working, I'm like, okay, I can see it, what you're doing here, and it works. That's the thing.
That's an electrical diagram. Because being an electrician, I look at all the switches because I didn't get tied into, like the doctor in chiropractic. It's primary care, so we're PCPs, but it's a lot of neuromuscular things, a lot of muscle and bone, really. But I was being an electrician. I looked at the neural connection to it because it's neuromuscular skeletal.
Mm.
But when most chiropractors are in the 18 colleges, they teach heavy into muscle tone and especially the bone joint stuff, which is great. It's a huge part of it, but not as much into the neurologic control to the system. But we do have the diplomate in under the ASA that does teach that. But it is just like a computer. Computers are copied after us because they're on or off switches.
Mm.
All the code is in 0 or 1s. And a lot of the switches in brain, you'd have to inhibit a switch that turns off something to turn it back on. So there's just not an on. So you have to inhibit an inhibitor switch, and then it's naturally back on.
Yeah. So I think the way I can break it down for people to understand, because it's a lot of information. When I first went to you, I think my first two sessions, I was kind of blown away about learning first about my neurological well-being, and then just what happened was that we go to Dr. Brock. If you go to Dr. Brock's office, you're going to go and he's going to assess you, and based on your neurological function, he's going to do some tests. And each test is going to see, hey, you're right brain dominant or left brain dominant, right? Yeah. And so I'd love for you to kind of break it down on, what you usually do when you have someone come to your office and what you're usually assessing and so forth.
Yeah, because I have to figure out their dominant side of brain. So when I do that, I first check muscle tone. Because if the brain, it's always top down. So if the brain is imbalanced or fatigued, it's not going to control the muscle tone right away. So I have to see if there's a strong side and a weak side. And when you muscle test, they should be able to resist and lock out their joints. That's a 5 out of 5 for muscle strength. And if they can resist and I can overcome them just a little bit and the joint starts to move, that's a 4 out of 5. So something changed. So the conduction speed from getting from the brain to that muscle tone had slowed down just a bit. But I have to see how it is. So I'll go through, if they do have like one side that's strong, I'll start going through eye movement patterns. Because the eyes, it takes every part in the brain to control the eyes and how they conjugately move. So they should move like they're glued together. But since all of us have hemisphericities, one side is dominant, we'll have one direction of the eyes that is fatiguing, or it'll start to open up and it'll be disconjugate. So when I can see that in movements. If you look at enough eyes, thousands of eye movements, you can immediately tell what side of brain is deficient. So you can look, and then body posture with muscles that'll tighten more on one side. So as I'll look at the eyes mistracking, like let's say up to the right, it can go up to the left just fine and down to the right just fine, which is the same part of brain. Cerebellum in the back, that's your position, balance, coordination, and eye movements. But then if I start tracking up to the right and it starts fatiguing, or one eye will open up more or turn a different way, that's fatigue. So fatigue is an area of brain that's under firing. So I'll see, I'll start with the eyes and I'll see the fatigue in one pattern of eye movement patterns. But then you can test some muscles like a foot or a shoulder or something, and then they'll look up to their dominant good moving side, and it's fine, nice locking out, and then they can look up to the one that's fatiguing. And it's not only the eye muscles, but it's every skeletal muscle with it will start to get weakened. And when they do slow down like that, they get short, tight, weak, and painful. They start pulling you in, and they're not protecting you. So I can determine right away through the eyes what sign of brain. But there's a lot of windows to look at that. They could look at how the tongue comes out. If it pulls one way or the other way, you can tell what switches in brain are doing that. The palate, the soft palate, when you say ah, it should rise even. But if one side isn't firing as high, that's the same side of brain function and brainstem weakness. So there's a million switches in the whole mapping system. But we're just built on reflexes. There's highly neurologic compound reflexes. So like the tectospinal is a good example. If I hear a noise coming out, let's say my right side, I receive that in my brainstem at cranial 8. That is in charge of acoustic. So anything I hear registers in brain. And then automatically this built-up reflex will tell my eyes to look that way because I just heard a sound. So we didn't have to think about this. It's an automatically preset thing. So I hear it in cranial 8 through acoustic. I turn my eyes, that's 3, 4, and 6. Cranial nerves will move all the eye muscles that way. And then I'll activate my neck to turn, which is another cranial nerve, 11, which is accessory. So I have this compound reflex called the tactile spinal reflex. So you hear a sound, boom, I hear it, I look, and I turn my head. So you'll see this broken down. It's usually super seniors, and they have some gait walking issues, and they're doing okay. They're really concentrating and not falling down or veering. But then they hear something, they turn their head, and all of a sudden they lose their step. I mean, we see it all the time when someone's skiing or driving, or we turn our head to something and we go off course. It's usually a dysfunction in that reflex. So it's started to inhibit or slow down. So when you go to use it, it's shutting down. And that'll create muscle tone issues, and that can tighten your neck as a secondary result. So everything in our brain comes in through sensory first. So whether it's the lights, it's the sounds, it's the temperature, it's a body movement, it's a posturing, these are all sensory. And the most important part of brain, which happens a lot in traumatic brain injuries, it starts to misfire. So this is thalamus. So the thalamus is the deepest part of the brain, the most has the most blood vessels, blood supply to it, most important. And it regulates all of the sensory barrages we get on a daily basis. And then it has to attenuate it, which means it filters it down so we can focus. So this part of the brain has to filter the world, and when it doesn't do that, we become unfocused. And is directly related to anxiety and depression. So this is our shield. So thalamus, if it can filter everything just fine, step it down so we can focus at different things. But the problem is when that's imbalanced, when you have trauma or long time hemispheric differences, you're driving one side of the brain way more, it starts to fatigue. So you're not firing as fast as it normally should have been. And that will change your muscle tone. So sensory in has to filter well, and if it doesn't, it starts locking up muscle tone. So it's sensory in and motor down. So you can see by looking at someone's posture, they'll have all this flexion tone. And then what I go through is I start doing sensory. I'll do tuning forks. I'll shine lights. I'll like our basic day, and everyone in the world now, we sit in flexion and we look at screens of some kind. So your brain now has to process all of the sensory, flashing lights, and it wasn't always like that. So I think since we had cell phones become computers, it really torqued or really demanded thalamus, the shield, to work harder, but it's dropping.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we're getting light sensitive, sound sensitivities. It's tough.
Yeah, I first came across functional neurology when I was involved with an agency called Bud's Odyssey, which is a nonprofit, and the gentleman, I think his name's Bill or Bob. I think it's Bob, but his dad was a veteran, and he had brain trauma, and I don't know if he did commit suicide or not, but I know he received trauma from his dad's behavioral problems from his brain trauma. So he started this nonprofit to help veterans, and then it kind of leaned into helping firefighters and first responders to where you just call them up and they'll give you free treatment to go to a couple different chiropractic functional neurology offices. One is in Irvine. Yeah. And so you could call them up, and they just do a phenomenal job at trying to, first of all, scan your brain. That's through a functional brain scan. And when you're doing the brain scan, you're checking your makeup within, you're doing like word problems while you're doing this scan. So you're not just getting a straight scan, right? You're doing either math problems, word problems, or different like screen tests and eye movements. So by the end of the first assessment, you got a scan to see, hey, what is your brain activity looking like? What is your brain scan saying? And so for me, I was like, I had my brain trauma stuff. So I started going there, and I realized how bad my brain trauma was, on top of going back to work and working a very stressful career, exposed to so much trauma. and so forth, right? I'm just having this hypervigilance and constantly using my administrative function, which exhausts me, to shut down the right side of my body. So, but they do hyperbaric chamber therapy and it's paid for. So you're doing about 20 sessions of hyperbaric chamber therapy along with neural feedback, which helps you basically come into a theta brainwave state to where you relax. It's basically a meditation. But those
terrific.
those three things together were phenomenal, and it was free. You know, if you are a firefighter and you've had to deal with some of these things, and they do correlate it to PTS or PTSD, and their results are skyrocketing with your sleep and your stress levels and so forth. Great program, but that's why introduction into it. And so that gentleman, actually, his name's Dr. D or Dr. D Sienna, who came and did a speech this last conference I went to over in San Diego. And he was talking about how much he's seen firefighters who never even had blunt trauma to the brain coming into his office who have the same type of brain scan from blunt trauma, right? So like stress, trauma to the body, it's affecting your brain function to where you're overexerting yourself and you're exhausting yourself and you're just dumping your energy levels. So he was huge on illuminating this to other people. The audience was like, wow, we never knew this was
terrific.
something that's huge for this line of work. And he was saying it's like you have an injury, right? And you can do anything you can. You can go to any type of like self-help conferences to say you can, if you think positively, you're going to live a good life. But if you have an injury, you cannot fix the brain injury and try to think your way into a positive way of living. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense, right? If you're injured, right? If you have a femur that's broken, you can't think your way into positivity to fix that femur. So there has to be some type of treatment in order to fix that. So I think that's the thread that's been common, and people don't even realize they had a head injury years ago. Then it's been affecting them. It's been affecting their mood. It's been affecting their posture, their flexion of their muscles, and their injuries are not correlating it to the brain trauma and so forth. You know what I mean?
And it could be pretty subtle too. If you look back, I mean, we forget like all the childhood stuff. I mean, maybe we played soccer too much. We're doing headers all day, but we didn't feel anything bad at that time. But the brain will change. It'll start to under fire.
I mean, I played soccer for years and football and skateboarded without a helmet, and like went to punk rock shows and metal shows. Like, I just know for a fact, like just from those things, outside of like had some really bad actual concussions, like hit to the head. So never relating it to the micro, traumas that has been caused to the brain. You know what I mean?
And that's what we're getting with CTEs in football. They might not be a full tackled concussion, but they're constantly slamming helmets into shoulder pads over and over and over.
Oh man, the Aaron Hernandez documentary was a huge illuminator for a lot of people because, I mean, the guy he went crazy. You know what I mean? He started killing people. And then, with his autopsy, they did the brain scan. He had like black spots all over his brain.
Oh, big
So, like this guy behaviorally is being affected by the brain trauma and his mood, his anger issues. Like it's directly affecting his frontal lobe, and he's lashing out and killing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll alter your consciousness because most of the brain is unconscious. So those reflexes, if they're set up, you won't be aware of it because that's the conscious part, but it will then change your consciousness because that's more in the frontal lobe. But the majority of the firing of the brain and automatic systems, we have no awareness of it.
So you were telling me too that alcohol affects the thalamic side of the brain, which is like the midbrain. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's literally midbrain.
Okay.
It's just above the midbrain.
And so like alcohol disturbs the thalamus for its functioning and being able to deal with anxiety and depression and like those things in balance, right?
Yeah, so it blocks it out so we can't feel it or it numbs us. But really because it's slowing the sensory awareness of it. And it also, it attacks cerebellum right away. So the balance coordination stuff. It's completely because the cerebellum regulates the input from body movements, and it also processes the smooth output. But thalamus is completely tied into cerebellum in every way. So it has to filter. So all that the amount of sensory coming in from that, whether it's a conscious thought, anxiety feeds into that, lights, body movements, muscle tone, that all feeds and regulates through thalamus.
That's crazy because, you know, like, I mean, firefighters and police officers, they drink a lot. You know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah, that's
add
teachers.
a job full of trauma and full of, let's say, just that administrative function, right? And then you're coming off work, off shift, not sleeping, and then you're just going off on a bender at the river with the boys,
Yeah.
and like, you're not even going to be able to process like the things you've experienced, number one, and then you're slowing your brain activity down. No wonder guys are getting injured and having, like, you know, rid with chronic pain throughout like a 30-year career based off their habit of drinking alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all that alcohol does turn into acetaldehyde, and it just melts the brain. It's so destructive. But that's a coping mechanism. So if the brain isn't able to filter or process while our shield is down, then we cope other ways. Which makes sense. I understand why they do it. Yeah, it's very, yeah, I went through so many years of college and military. So that's just the thing. It goes with it.
Yeah, it's like milk and cookies, right?
Yeah,
Like, it just goes well
exactly.
together. But does it go well together? You know, based off what we're learning now, how harmful it is, it's really, I guess, it doesn't serve your full capacity to show up in this career, and then also just operational wise, right? You want to show up and be the best professional firefighter you can be. You know what I mean?
Oh,
But
yeah.
so that's why I do the best to kind of illuminate practices for people to do things to not where you don't have to drink and you get that edge taken off a little bit, right? To where you can still feel like that stress level is taken down without having to crack open a beer. You know what I mean? And I think that's been kind of shifting a little bit more over the years because, number one, you're showing up to work and you just feel like dog shit after you drink, and you know you're not getting full nights of rest, and after a while of burning candles at both ends, it's just not going to serve you to be the best you can. And I think people always want to be the best they can, especially firefighters in this line of work. You know, they always strive to be this, you know, great firefighter, this great you know, employee to also be a part of the crew as well, because you're just one piece of the puzzle inside of a station, right? You're so important based off your safety and someone else's safety, so everyone goes home to their families.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to recognize and to see. But I think with some of the neurological function things, there was something interesting I saw was there was brain scans on alcoholics and then also porn addicts. They had the same exact brain scan as an alcoholic because of the high amount of dopamine they're pushing into their brains
From the addiction stuff.
from the addiction. And I found it to be super interesting to see, like, oh wow, like how that's super harmful to be, you know, just you don't even understand it, right? You're just doing something that's a habit from when you were in your, you know, 13 or whatever up until now. And this is something I kind of would talk to people about, and then guys would laugh at me like, oh yeah, dude, whatever. But it's serious, right? In a sense for like your well-being and how your brain is functioning.
Yeah, because perception, it's the amygdala, the pleasure center, doesn't know any different from being addicted to alcohol or pornography or anything else. Like, you could be addicted to religion, you could be addicted to like extreme sports, but that addiction will have a wind-up loop in the amygdala, and it fatigues everything else. It definitely deactivates most of the brain when it does. It's incredible stuff. Like with the drinking and thalamus, like you look at a hangover. So you're drinking, now you're sensitive. You wake, oh, the lights are too much. Oh God, I can barely move. I'm so rigid. God, my head hurts because the muscles are now reacting to it. But that's all the shield. So when you drink, you take down the thalamic shield. There's no protection. There's no processing. There's no moving. That's exactly what a deactivated thalamus feels like. just a massive hangover, and we're not optimal. Like it's pretty dangerous when you're yeah, because you can't produce, you can't run, jump, protect, think fast. It's all done. Your thalamus has crashed, and you're toast.
Man, I've gotten off shift and have felt like I've had a hangover before. You know, if I'm working,
Yeah.
I mean, for years I was at busy assignments and I would come home just wrecked and feeling like I had a hangover. You know what I mean? Like I just wanted to be in a dark room and just be away from everything, loud noises, anything like that. And I think now I'm correlating
Deprivation.
why, because I'm just that part of my brain is fatigued and it's not functioning. You know what I mean? Then and later down the road, chronic pain started to kind of step into my life, and kind of like little by little, you know, over time, that fatigue and being at the busy areas, I think that was really harsh on my entire makeup. Really, my hormones will be out of balance. My testosterone just dumped, and I was just so stressed out. You know what I mean?
But you see these chronic fatigue syndrome groups, and they're really what they're not connecting, because they have all different causations of why they're there. They just know they have chronic fatigue, and it's really low thalamic firing, because all those fatigue syndromes is regulated through the shield. And you get the same thing with like fibromyalgia groups. They're in chronic pain, and everything hurts, every part of their body, all this. But when the thalamus crashes, the outgoing neurons to muscle tone to keep it nice, long, and strong and out of pain starts crashing too. So they're one and the same almost. When they're fatigued, they have muscle pain. And it's not that it's a condition in its own, it's a low firing thalamus. And we do it through overfiring of different unconscious parts like addictions, or it could be traumatic. But even stress over time, you're looking at cortisol levels that are raised hormonally that start boring holes in the frontal lobe of brain. So stress will start crashing brain and destroying brain. One of the easy things to do is short interval training. Because when you do that, like if you're moving so fast for 10 seconds and then you rest for 50 seconds, and you do that about 5 to 10 minutes, you're just blazing fast moving. I call it blurring. But you could do that in a cycle, you could run, walk, you could do fast jacks, you could do all kinds of, but this will start to fire up the thalamus, increase your dopamine levels for happiness, restores that. It starts increasing testosterone for energy, and it dumps glutathione from the brain to protect all the cells in your body. So we have Neurogym in the office where they can work out and based on neurologic reflexes of safe moving, and they do blurring before that. So they dump glutathione. When you're jogging and you're running for like an hour, you're really increasing stress on your body. And that's increasing antioxidant production, and that's destroying inflammation processes. But if you're doing blurring before, if you're moving so fast, intervals, then you're dumping glutathione. Glutathione picks up the free radical damage that you're going to get when you work out. So that's another way to switch the hormones in a good way, because the brain will switch. Cortisol will go up from the stress of the job all day long, and then we'll be fatigued from all that factor. So if you blur, I wake up every day and I work out for a half hour, but I blur before it and I try to do weight training, and those are my combinations in how I regulate the hormones in my brain.
Yeah, so that brings up a good point. Is like, so because of your functional and neurological practice, like you just don't turn the brain switches on, but also doing workouts to strengthen the muscles and to inhabit like that brain function to get like the whole package, right? So that was one of the big things for me. Like and that's why I ended up working with you, because I ended up having to, you know, strengthen the muscles that were atrophied as well. And then having to recover, but get stronger to where I can go lift ladders and put on all my equipment and go to a fire and be okay. You know what I mean? So I think that was huge for me, because I love working out. I love being in shape, and I truly believe like that's one of my hobbies. I like to feel like that. I'm in this embodiment for being the best activity. I always make fun of I always make fun and say like, you know, the top primal male performance you can find is right here. But it's just like a joke, right? Like, but we have to be like top performance as firefighters physically. So, I think with all of the workouts too, they're very strange when you're doing them.
Oh, they're odd.
But they work so well. And I think over time, like you really feel the strength come through with those little muscles that need to be strengthened along the spinal cord. If you have issues with your back or your neck or whatever it is, I think over time, like you start to trust, the workouts you're providing. But talking to some people like at the firehouse, they all just want a quick fix. They all just want to go to a chiropractor and just get cracked and then go back to work. And I want to kind of reiterate that it's not really how it works, and that's actually, I think it's just a malpractice. If you just think you're just going to crack someone and think they're going to be in alignment and then just go back to work pain-free. And I think everyone wants a quick fix, right? A magic bullet is just going to cure all your pain. But I don't really think that that's possible because there has to be some type of, think of years of being in a career like this, right? You have to unwind those years of trauma, those years of stress. And I think one of the biggest benefactors is first you have to get your body out of stress. So one of my biggest things is through Human Garage, I was telling you about that practice that I do. Every day I do one of their workouts. It's a stress reset. So we get the body out of stress first. You really need to do that because now how are you supposed to be, how do you let the body heal itself through a high cortisol stress state? And then from there, I do your thalamic practices and all the brain tapping, things like that. And then I do your exercises to strengthen my back and my neck. And then I can do my workout where I'm lifting weights and I'm strengthening my body and I feel good, right? That's my biggest thing. So
that's key.
Yeah, I'd like for you to talk about more the weight training and those things that you do and habit for your clients. I'm gonna turn off this heater real quick. It's a little hot in here.
You have a sweatshirt.
I know. I have a sweatshirt on, man. So yeah, the weight training stuff.
Yeah, because that's in the neurology. So all functional neurologists like us, there's not many, and we all gravitate towards our favorite part of that system. So I have a friend in Beverly Hills that manipulates skull sutures. He's very, very good at it. He was an SOT, sacral occipital practitioner, years before he became a neurologist. And then he now uses that knowledge to teach those chiropractors that do SOT, the neurology behind the brain, and why that system works. But he does a lot of time going through manipulations of sutures, more than I've seen other functional neurologists. So each of us have a different specialty within our stuff. But mine is thalamic activation and spinal cord muscle activation. So most don't know what spinal cord muscles are, and there's a few layers. Like we'll have our skeletal movers, our outside muscles, but as you go deeper into the body, you have posture muscles. So these posture or spinal cord muscles, like let's say in the neck. If I'm sitting on a computer, I'm a student in college or something, I'm always looking down. What's going to overuse into flexion posture will shut down some of the stabilizers for my neck. One of the major ones is the sternocleidomastoid. This is our sleeping trauma muscle. We wake up and we have a stiff neck, or we're in a whiplash, like a car accident, and we can't move our neck. It's locked in. Well, it's attached to the mastoid behind the ear and the sternum, but it's highly neurologic. It's a cord muscle, which means if this is deactivated and the brain can't find it, it's what we call proprioception. So if the proprioceptive feedback to brain, the brain just doesn't know where it is anymore. So you can traumatize the muscle or quickly move it or just slowly over time deactivate it. The brain forgets where it is. So we have to restore this, because every time I would move my neck to the right, and the action of SCM is to move, my right goes to the right. If the brain can't find that muscle anymore, every time I go to the right, it starts locking in. It starts casting in by default. Because if I can't move my neck to the right and the brain doesn't know where those muscles are, I could dislocate a shoulder. So every time I look, Yeah, that's what holds us in. So if the brain can't find the muscle, it starts to go to the primitive default of flexion posture. So these muscles hold our spine. SCMs hold the cervical together, the primary muscle. Thoracics, we're looking at scapular muscles like rhomboids that hold their blades down, serratus to reach. So if these are turned off, like my serratus anterior muscle for reaching forward, I could reach up and grab a glass in a cabinet and my legs will go out because the connection is from brain down. So if my leg muscles, which pass through my thoracic spine, if they're not, the brain doesn't know where they are. So I'm reaching and my serratus isn't feeding back to my brain to tell it where it is. It's going to shut down all the descending muscle tone, the leg nerves too. So they're all connected through different sections of the spine. So the cervical, we can't move each vertebrae, C4/5, C5/6 conscious. So we have no control over that. I use an activator to turn those on. But we can't move each bone, but we can move the entire cervical spine. So all C1 through C7s and all the cervical nerves. That's conscious. But we have to be able to activate certain ones because they'll shut down. So that's where the core, the SCM of the neck, that has to be active. And I have exercises to reestablish the feedback to brain so the brain knows where it is. There's ones in thoracic, so my whole scapular shoulder movements, they have to be back online or they have to tell the brain where it is constantly. And then for low back, you have two rotation muscles, you have an extension, and you have a flexion muscle. And these all have to be firing quickly and telling my brain where they are in every moment. And it's like sleeping on your arm. If you sleep on your arm, you can't move it and you can't feel it. And it's not until you start lifting your arm and touching your arm and bringing in the sensory that the brain can find it again. And then you can move your muscle. But the cord muscles are very much like that. So we have separate exercises to stabilize the cervical, the thoracic, lumbar, and sacrum sections. And then you can strengthen because you're set up for injury. Mm-hmm. So if I have a scapular weakness and I'm trying to do a shoulder thing, or even I'm doing low back and my shoulder's pitched out of position, it's going to turn my legs off. Then you rip them. So that's what it set me up from the end of my doctorate in chiropractic, is that I was weightlifting in the gym like I had been doing for a decade before. And I ended up in the same week just warming up, same ritual, and I ripped my pec on my left. I was bench pressing on a flat bench. And then I thought, okay, well, that was terrible, but I'm going to do some shoulders then. So like the next day I'm doing some shoulder, I ripped my shoulder. And then I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? I can't weightlift and something's happening to my left side. So I'm ripping my pec, my shoulder. I'm going to run on a treadmill. Running on the trail, I got to do something. And I ripped my hamstring. Like, what is that? That I can't move without ripping something on my left side. What is wrong with that? And that's when I brought in the electrician stuff. Like, oh, there's a switch. It's something that's setting up my left side of my body where I can't move it, and it's damaging when I try to do it. So that's a connection through the brain and spinal cord posture muscles.
That's crazy. That makes sense. Meaning, I would do the same thing where I would like exercise and then something would hurt. So I would do another workout, but then something else would hurt but I didn't know or relate it to, spinal cord function or brain function, and realizing, looking back on it, man, like I just had some serious, brain trauma issues to where like I just was ignorant in the sense of just pushing my body when the body is saying stop. There's a problem here. So yeah. My thing is going to the core root of the problem, right? And to fix something. And I would say the number one injuries we have in our line of work is backs. Back injuries all the time.
100% of people have some injury in back.
Yeah.
Everyone will have it at some time. But a job like that, yeah, you're demanding it. You have to use it so much more than someone just sitting at a desk.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone at work yesterday and talking about a guy who was forced to retire medically and only had like 6 years on the job, to where he had a back injury, then thought he was okay, went back to work, and then really injured himself even more. And then he was done. Like, he can't go back. I think he had some type of numbness and loss of feeling in his like lower limbs. So he medically retired, and that's just like the worst case scenario story you would hear, right? No one wants that, especially when you have kids, you got bills to pay, you have all this shit you got to do, and
So much
that's
more life.
it's terrible. But I think there is hope, really. Now, I've always believed that there's hope, and I think you getting out of the regular mundane doctor visits, who are just going to prescribe you medications and then send you to physical therapy. Because when I was going to physical therapy, I was in pain after. I was like, hey, why am I in pain after going to physical therapy? There's something underlying here that I'm just not seeing yet, but it's just not working. So we're under these old ways of how we treat, how we diagnose, number one, and then how can we benefit from going to the root of the issue, and then we recover quickly, and we can actually get past and have a better life once we find out the root cause of something. That's like where my life is kind of headed in this pathway. If you're even having this podcast talking about that, get to the root cause, because if you don't, you're gonna repeat the same lesson, the same stuff over and over and over, right? And the same with your body. Your body is sending you signals; it's speaking to you, but you're not learning the language. So let's learn the language first. Let's learn the language, and then let's get out of the suffering, and then we can live a life where we're efficient and we can show up, in the best capacity we can. But I think there's just a lack of education, and we're so with the medical system. There's not much innovative process that's happening here. There's a lot of red tape, right? Between what you can and cannot do has to be approved, and all this shit. And it's like, what
It's
are we
guided by
doing
insurance companies, which doesn't make sense.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even PT it's a great thing, but it's been so reduced because then they give them 6 visits. Here's 6. One we're doing an exam. We got 4, and then there's one for next. So you get 4. And you go home and you're supposed to. It's been so debilitated by insurance dictating procedures and stuff.
oh, it's a scam. I've already learned it's all a scam. And then you have, God forbid, you're going to go through workers' comp process. Because I want to do a whole episode on someone who really understands workers' comp and the laws revolving around it, and because the horror stories that we hear through workers' comp is just insane. And guys who are really injured on the job, there are some people out there who abuse the system, right? But for the most part, I think it's for people in our line of work, we want to get back to work because we enjoy our jobs so much. But how we don't want to also push the limit to where we re-injure ourselves. Now we go back to that same story with someone medically retiring. So you have someone, let's say in Wisconsin, that's a part of the insurance company that's approving the medical care you're getting to the doctor that's treating you over here 1,000 miles away, and is the decider for what's going to approve of something, right? For you to get better. That's an ass backwards system based off insurance claims.
Yeah, exactly. I got out of a lot of insurance because they've reduced the payments to doctors, but they also there's all that overwritten medical claims. It's bad. So many denials for no reason. Insurance doesn't like to pay out because it's a money thing.
Well, luckily for our insurance, we have really good insurance in a sense where anything that says chiropractic in the headline or the person who's treating you immediately approved because of how many back injuries we get, right? And we want to prevent that from happening later down the road. So that is one of the good things about our insurance that does allow that. But you have to go to the right person. That's the only thing. I don't know how many chiropractors I've been to till I found a functional neurological chiropractor like yourself.
Yeah, because even in the story, you have to stabilize. You have to stabilize the brain so it's firing even. You have to turn on all those spinal cord reflexes so the muscles will hold it together. Because even if you go through a series of the medications and then the PT, they might not stabilize that section. So you have a shoulder with an instability, and strength training it and stretching it might not be enough. You have to turn it on. That's the first phase of healing on the prevention side. Turn it on so the brain knows where it is. Neural activation. That's phase 1. So then you go from neural activating so the brain can find it and move it and not shut it down, to then loosening it and ultimately strengthening. But you can't get to strengthening phases if the brain doesn't know where it is. You have to neural activate. You got to turn that stuff on.
Yeah. So some of these exercises to turn on the brain were it's really bizarre,
Oh,
right? So the thalamic tapping, right? So it was really interesting because we would assess the right side of my body. And so if I would turn my leg to the right, there would be some type of misfiring for my hips or for my back, and so forth, right? And then so when you would turn to the right and you had me turn to the right, you'd move my foot, it would be limp. And then we would turn something on by tapping the top of my head or doing some type of eye exercise, and then we'd assess again, and then it would be strong. And so that course of assessment would continue throughout the rest of my body to seeing what's weak, what's misfiring, and what can we turn on. So I would like for you to kind of talk about the thalamic tapping and how you came across that.
Oh, yeah.
And the exercises, they're really bizarre, right? I mean, if you see someone, you're walking to the store and someone's tapping the top of their head, or like, what the hell is that person doing? But
my whole family does that. We're on the street, Harley comes by, and instantly we're just tapping away because we're trying to attenuate sound. But the way it works, there's a dura over the brain and between the skulls, so it's this thin, almost plastic wrap layer of vessels and nerves. But that has feedback. So when you're touching a part of the skull, whether you're tapping or just touching, it fires directly to that side of the brain. So if I want to activate the temporal lobe on the right, it's right through, probably a quarter inch, right through the skull to that brain. Just tapping fires through the dura, which fires into the neurons on that side of the brain. And what I learned from actually working with autism kids, they taught me this. I had to find out what kind of sensories they're able to perceive. Because autism is cerebral palsy of thalamus and the basal ganglia around it. So they are sensory wrecked. Because not only is it not firing fast enough to shield out all the aberrant sounds and movements and stuff, but they can't, it's just not there to process. The neurons haven't developed enough. So they'll get sound and they'll start yelping, and it's painful for them. They'll rock, they'll do things to avoid, they'll yelp, and they'll bang their heads. So I would go through, well, this child can take sound, but they can't take light. Or they can balance, but they can't look at a digital picture. Or there's so many different sensories that have to fire through thalamus. So the way they changed in looking at autism kids, I developed how we can activate the thalamus in the rest of us. And the basic one is like a light sensitivity with migraines. So they get light, but they can't process. Oh, it annoys them because it's not filtering well. And then they start to stiffen their neck, like their upper trap will tighten, and the ram's horn headache will give them headaches, and they call it migraines. But that's really thalamus. So I learned by looking at autism kids and how they bang their heads just by habit. Like, well, maybe there's something to it. So I looked through the neurology and how the dura layer, if anywhere in the skull, it fires adjacent to that part of the brain. But thalamus is directly, it's the deepest part. But when they would tap on the top of their head, or they would slap their head or bang their head on the top, kind of about the size of the apex of the head would be like a yarmulke size. That on the top of the head, all that refers into thalamus. Not on the sides, not on the front, nowhere else in brain, just very top. Then I saw where I'm like, oh, they're sound sensitive. Let me do a couple tuning forks, make some discordant sound, and see how they take it. But when I was tapping on their heads, and then they all of a sudden would calm down instead of react to it and get away from it. So that stimulus changed. So then I furthered into how you're looking at depth perception and how you can converge and accommodate, but then you can do it ipsilateral with one eye, or you can go far near. So I started to set up a lot of protocols. So I would hear a history. I'd say, oh man, my eyes aren't tracking well. I feel heavy in the eye, feel fatigued. I'm like, well, that's a depth sensitivity, or it's something with lights. But then I look more into how the phones are with kids, and they're scrolling, they're just staring at more high definition. They're constantly they increase the barrage of sensory into their brain more than we ever had in different generations. And these kids are coming out all messed up. They're fatigued. They're inactive. They're goofy because their brain crashes with it. I mean, I went through. I probably have 30 or 40 different sensory protocols that I've seen that I can reproduce, and it either shuts down the entire body, all the muscle tone with it, or it picks it right back up if they reset their sensitivity. So it's not just light sensitive, but they can be balance sensitive. They can have what we call vestibular ocular reflex. So if you turn one way, everything turns, like you turn your head right, the world turns left. This is like driving. So when you're driving, you have all the lights coming from the left because we're right-hand drivers. They could be fatigued. So all of a sudden they're sitting for too long and the lights are fatiguing them on the streets. And then they start to bind up. Maybe they get like a sciatica thing because their muscles, their brain fatigued in the thalamus, and then their muscles bind up by default. It always goes to flexion posture. So their hips are tightening and they're in pain. Now they have a numb foot because they drove for 2 or 3 hours in LA traffic. But it's all regulated through thalamus. Easiest fix. All the treatments in neurology look like kindergarten protocols. They're just tapping and shining lights, or they're turning and tapping, or they're just doing a small. Like if you want to turn on the stabilizer for neck, then you sit at a 10-degree angle to the side for 5 seconds, and you just loaded that muscle, and its feedback told the brain where it was again, woke it back up. So that it's all through thalamus, but tapping is the key to it. So I call it thalamic tapping. And then you bring in whatever sensory is fatiguing you, and like sound. I would sound near my ear, and I would tap at thalamus, and about 5 to 10 seconds later, it's firing and processing that one gateway, that one processor through the acoustic nerve. I broke down so many different ones to it. But through the history of all the patients I've had over time, they'll tell you what it was. Oh, I was watching TV and I just got really tired. Or I was walking and I could only walk a block and then my low back tightened up on me. Well, they have linear motion sensitivity. So the firing neurons that develop your walking protocols all have to tell the brain where they are. And if they're not doing that at a fast rate and the thalamus isn't processing, it defaults and casts us in. So there's all kinds of different sensitivities in thalamus. But really, you just tap and you bring in the sensory that's not processing.
It's pretty interesting. I think it's even more interesting in the fact that we tend to want to posture back into a fetal position, right? Going back to birth. And when I work with Human Garage, and the more I continuously work with that and your due process of treatment, like they work really well together in a sense where most of the emotional compilation of what the body's holding on top of the neurological resets really worked so well because of, and what's interesting with Human Garage is that a lot of times they put you into a fetal position or a semi-fetal position in order to process the emotional part that needs to be released from the body, because it's the most safe your body feels, because you're going back to a primal nature of which we were in the womb. So exactly. We were our safest when we were in that position because we were with our mothers for 9 months. So what's fascinating is when because now I do work on other people to help them process emotions and trauma that's being stored in the body. And when I put them in this type of fetal position, they feel safe, number one, and there's a lot of power that comes from that fetal position. So when you are watching a pitcher and he's winding up and he's sticking his leg up to accentuate a semi-fetal position, he is able to explode with a ton of power, which is really interesting. It's such a primal state, and it's super fascinating to watch someone go able to release that much power of what they're holding dormant within on an emotional scale. And it's just funny how when the body is now being disturbed at a neurological brain function, it starts to contort into that position. It seems super fascinating why the body already knows what to do, because if you're not listening to the body, you're not speaking the language, and it's just going to do what it wants. So you have to learn to, like we said before, learn to speak the language of what it's doing. And it's a lot of times for me, I started to understand my body was pissed at me because I wasn't understanding the language. So over time, if I would do a workout, it's like, stop, you're in pain. Don't do this anymore.
Yeah. It's unstable. It could
Stop
be worse.
this. Yeah. And so it's sending these signals to me, but for how stubborn I am and not listening to myself and not listening to my body, that became a really big lesson on a philosophical scale. I was like realizing most of my life lessons were coming from me not listening and then also being stubborn.
Yeah. That makes sense.
On a behavioral scale, so I think
It'll pull you back in because it's
Right.
like the master protective mode.
totally makes sense. And now putting it all together, and even it all starts clicking and firing when now I'm learning to just listen to my body. Hey, is there something off today? Is there something weak right now? And so I'm stopping myself from just going into autopilot and to just jumping into a straight workout and to see where my body's at right now. What does my body need in this moment? Does it need rest? Just getting off work, I'm exhausted. Is it okay to just jump into running 1 mile right now? And instead of resting for a little bit and then going into it, and even with like my cold plunge practice, sometimes I'm like, I want to do a cold plunge because it feels really good, but sometimes I need to just rest and not do a cold plunge and maybe do a hot bath. So some of these things are really interesting, in relation to building a relationship with your body. And I think some people lost a relationship with the body to try to learn what it's telling us. And then we take a pill to offset, what the brain is telling us now, which I think is a really huge epidemic in itself. We're quick to pathologize something that's a behavioral scale. Say, hey, you have anxiety, man. Let me give you this pill right here, man. You got pain in your body. Let me give you this pill and let's see if it goes away. And I think that's a malpractice in itself, like how we're just going to over pathologize every single little thing, every single little symptom, especially
Still
with
avoiding those things.
Right. And especially with something like ADHD, right? Because I was deemed having ADHD as a child. And
I think it's a superpower. It can get so much done.
Exactly. And so, my parents never believed into pathologizing me. They just like, he's going to figure it out. And so they never put me on medication. So that was one of the hugest things. And I just realized I could function based off believing it's a superpower. I thought it was a superpower as well, because I could function really, really good. I think I just lose interest in things I'm not really interested in. And so that, being inside of a prison or a school per se, right? It's a gated, yard. And then you have a cafeteria. They feed you the same food. And then you go into a classroom and like, you're just, pinned to a seat. It's basically like a prison. And then you're forced to learn something that you may not be interested in. And then someone says, hey, he's acting up. He's hyper. He's not listening. Let's talk to your therapist or your doctor for this child, and let's see if we can put him on medication.
Oh yeah. And instead their brain is working so fast that the kids that are wandering and they don't look like they're paying attention, they actually absorb everything. So if you asked them in the classroom, oh, what's the answer to this question? It's a kid walking around in the back that listened perfectly and they'll answer it because their brain is at such a faster pace.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But it does have to be, regular.
Would you somewhat agree like this is like we're doing shit backwards. We're barely figuring it out now, you know what I mean?
Yeah, all my kids are homeschooled.
Oh, really?
But the more lefty, higher function, like one of our sons, he'll look like he's not even in the room paying attention, but he's there. He's wandering. He's putting something together. He's fidgeting with something. Every 9 out of 10 times when they ask him the whole room the question, he's got the answer to it. All the kids that look like they're paying attention, he's doing it at such a faster rate that he can do multiple tasks. And he's got that answer every time. So we just let him wander.
That makes a lot of sense. Like that you need to do other things because it's firing at a different rate,
Yeah, it's just to occupy and bring up more sensory to keep it that rate.
Super fascinating, man. Every time I hang out with you and to receive treatment, and then I'm always learning something new. It's like super bizarre. That's why I was telling you, hey, we got to do an episode, because I think people just need to have the awareness first, of what's out there, and maybe get some treatment for the pain that they're feeling. Because my biggest thing is the behavioral health crisis is just so severe. And one of the main add into the equation is that, guys are in chronic pain, or men and women are in chronic pain. So how can you be in a state of good mental function when you're just riddled with pain and you're just like circling the
can't.
drain, each day and just white knuckling chronic pain? It's crazy.
So when the brain decreases in firing speed, pain it's inverse. So the lower firing brain, because it's barraged by too much, will increase pain. They're absolutely inverse. So if you increase the brain function, the pain reduces.
So your facility does have hyperbaric chamber therapy as well.
Yeah, very advanced ones. Like the newest ones on the market, they're hard shelled. We have a 3-person chamber in there because you need to have hard shelled, because if it's just a soft shell balloon type thing, it can't get the pressure up enough. So you want 100% oxygen, and you want them to be hard shelled. And when they are, with the increased pressure, because every one of them you're breathing oxygen at 100% rate. But you also want to be saturated around you in your tissue with more oxygen under pressure, because it'll absorb through the skin that way. And it'll push with the more pressure, you'll breathe in the oxygen. It could push across a blood-brain barrier, and it stimulates BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factors. So that's what you need as a protein to increase more neurogenesis. So you're making new brain tissue. So when you're under pressure and you have a lot of oxygen, then it increases stem cells, which ultimately make new vessels in brain. So I have a lot of stroke patients, dementia, TBIs, autism, athletes, rheumatoid arthritis, because it's anti-inflammatory. But it makes new brain cells and makes new brain tissue along with the rest of the body. So like this last weekend, my dad and my son came out to visit for the holidays. My dad is on dialysis and he's on a donor list. But we had him in there because at night he has such bad sleep apnea. He's breathing 100% oxygen, but it's not under pressure. So though it may be really hard to seek deep into the kidneys, but under pressure, it goes right past the cell membranes and gets into it. It's amazing stuff. You look up studies in hyperbaric chambers, and it treats everything.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I came across hyperbaric chamber therapy, like the studies on it, I was like, well, what is this? And it's not cheap. That's the thing. If you're going to get to actual good hyperbaric chamber therapy, I think it's reasonably priced if you're going to go to a certain facility and buy like a package deal, right? That's what you offer.
Oh, yeah.
But I also found that Jeremy Renner, that actor, he got in an accident. Well, he got ran over by, I think it was a snowmobile. I don't quote me on that, but he had a terrible accident. Yeah, it was like a plow that ran over him, and he broke a ton of bones in his body, and then he thought he was going to die, and the doctors didn't think he was going to walk again. So the treatment he had done was he was recovering with hyperbaric chamber therapy, and so he started to cycle after he started getting strength in his legs through hyperbaric chamber therapy. He was cycling with like a chamber around his lower half of his body. And so he was increasing, his capacity to like that oxygen level and that pressurization on his tissues and his bones to start healing quicker. So he's able to bounce back from, almost dying and then recovering from his injury. So it's pretty amazing how
they're fast.
How quick it offers that healing care.
Because I always heard the stories, and I've read thousands of studies on the stuff, from like helping with cancer tumors down to like diabetes, but in the office I've seen crazy good stuff change, like surgeries, like skin cancer surgeries, where they had to slice like 4 inches down on the side of a temple because the cancer is all the way behind the hairline. And that clear up in like 3 visits in a week, the skin will just completely change.
Wow.
It's incredible stuff. Or someone with really bad gingivitis, and they want to pull teeth and do all this reconstructive stuff. And they're in the oxygen under pressure, and now the gums are nice and pink. The inflammation's gone. Like, there's so many cases. But I just love to see it myself. I had a dementia, Tourette's, Alzheimer's patient. He had all 3 of these. And his niece would pick him up from the home, and she'd walk him in the office, and he's very rigid, and scared, and this Tourette's, he's saying bad things like, I don't want to be here. What the heck are you putting? And he walks in, and we help him into the chamber. And then when he's done, he gets out and he's like, this is great. Oh, I feel so good. And his niece is like, let's go to lunch. I'll take it. And she goes, lunch? That's amazing. Let's go. Totally different guys. Muscle tone's nice and relaxed. His mood is different because he increased dopamine and serotonin levels in there. So, I mean, all three of those diseases that he has changed with oxygen under pressure.
Wow.
They're incredible.
Do you go into it yourself all the time?
Yeah, as much as I can, which is like once a week. I wish I could go more.
What do you recommend for people to, if they want to do hyperbaric chamber therapy? Like, just do it often, or just do like the package deal, like which is like 10 sessions or something like that?
Yeah, because mine, I reduced mine considerably. Like the big chamber that I have with the 3 people, that thing should be $300 an hour, administered by a doctor like myself. But I dropped it to $100 because I just want people to use it. And if they buy a package, we even knock off $100. You buy 9 and get 10.
Mm.
Or even I had the bigger one because it was easier for me to put the stroke patients in there than the single unit. That was very hard.
Yeah.
I had to lift them and slide them in. So now the bigger one is good for the children too. So they have to have a parent, especially with the autism ones. So I usually have like a parent and a child, same price. And it's really, really affordable.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. So what else do you kind of offer as far as your services to someone who's, well, let's just say, because everyone's got back pain, right? In my department. So, what would you say like is your treatment care for someone has a herniated disc per se, and how long do you think that treatment takes to kind of help that person recover from that injury?
Yeah, because usually soft tissues healing, the studies show 4 to 6 weeks. If you stabilize it correctly, that's how long it takes to make it permanent. But for me in the office, that's phase 1 neural activation. So because of herniation, if it's non-traumatic, or even if it's traumatic, it knocked out those spinal cord protective muscles. So you have to reestablish those. And you have to go back in brain. So we go through phase 1 and 2, which is turning everything on and loosening within a few weeks. And then we go into phase 3, which is more of a strengthening protocols. So that whole time is about 4 to 6 weeks. And if they're more traumatic, there's damage to it, then we put them like coexisting with, they'll neural activate with me under neuropractic, and they'll do a session in the chamber. And then once they go into phase 3, then we start to put them in the gym, and we go through the neuro gym protocols, which is just like for low back, you have to be able to move using built-in spinal cord reflexes. So if you're not pulling in abdominis, or even like when you're doing leg extension, very typical, every gym, you're in the machine and you're kicking your legs up under pressure, you're doing quad strength. But neurologic wise, if you extend your legs but have your toes in, and when you're concentrically loading or coming up, pigeon toe, and then once you go to the top and you externally rotate your feet and come down, that's a neurologic control system. Mm-hmm. Every way we move is based on our walking patterns. And you could see it from 0 to 2. It's a motor system built in brain. But to push a quad is your foot internally rotates. Then when you go to lift up that foot, it externally rotates. Mm. So when you're doing leg extension things, you want to turn your foot out. When you pull your quad up, you want to have your foot in. Everything positions depending on how it's designed or where the attachments were. But it's our body movements when walking that's combined. So if someone in NeuroGym wanted to strengthen a bicep, well, this right bicep is connected across the cord in a reflex to the tricep on the opposite side, and also the hip flexor. So if I'm sitting there doing a right bicep, I'm weighted. I have like a 20-pound weight on my right bicep. I'm lifting my hip, and I'm pushing my left arm down to contract my tricep. They fire together. So in NeuroGym, we do cross-cord reflexes so you don't get injured, and you're recruiting more safety, built-in muscle tone. But that's pretty much, we go over 6 weeks of going through phase 1, 2, and 3 for strengthening.
It's pretty awesome. You know, that I did the neuro gym, and the workout we did was I was working, man. I was sweating, and it was a great workout. You know, it wasn't just like a small, physical therapy workout. It was you're definitely, exercising, and your heart rate's getting jacked up. And you're going to be in good shape after doing neuro gym workouts with Dr. Brock. So
I've been weightlifting for 35 years, but I keep learning more knowledge so I don't hurt myself again.
yeah.
So that's where I jumped into all that functional neurology stuff because I didn't want to rip my pec, shoulder, and
Yeah.
hamstring again.
Yeah,
It's
injuries
been
are the
pretty good.
worst, and we want to refrain from getting those as much as possible. But I think the brain function is really fascinating, especially with just even the behavioral stuff that can derive from it. You know what I mean? And being able to finally make a quick 180 turn just off brain function, right? And understanding how correlated it is, right? So I think it's huge.
So true.
But I think we're going to close up here. Kind of ended up on some time. But thank you so much, Dr. Brock. If someone wants to kind of link up with you, either through your website or whatever, how do they do that?
Yeah, because my website is drbrockjohnson.com. I'm in West Garden Grove. That's usually the easiest. I have YouTubes. I try to attempt speeches and podcasts like this, but at a very basic level. And that's on you. You could do Dr. Brock Johnson YouTube. You'll find me there. But on the website, should I put out the number?
You know what? I'm gonna put all the information in on the episode so people can find it, and on the YouTube episode as well, and each clip as well. So we'll be able to do that. But just wanted to throw out your accolades and all that stuff, so people can find you, and so forth.
Yeah, I was just a guy in Long Beach for 16 years in Long Beach, just trying to figure out the brain and heal myself. And everything I figured out, I made protocols for it, and 100 exercises for neural activation. And then 2 years ago, I needed to expand and get hyperbarics, and then we moved to West Garden Grove.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir, for coming over here. I really appreciate you for your time. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And take care.
Thank you. Amazing being here.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.
It's time for crab